Was it Mario Cuomo who was the one who said you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose? I thought of that this week. I saw what I thought was the funniest story I've seen in a long time about the Taliban being upset about having to govern now. And it's true, you know, it's a lot of fun to be the revolutionary. You know, it's a lot of, jihad is fun. It just is. But then you win. They won. And now they have to, govern this country. So Vice News, which I used to be a part of, they did this whole story they interviewed a lot of these Taliban commanders who are now living in the capital, Kabul, and they don't like it. One of them said, I miss the jihad life for all the good things it had. I love this. Husafa, a former sniper, said life was simple and free during jihad. The Taliban used to be free of restrictions, but now we sit in one place behind a desk. Don't you hate that? Mansoor, great guy, complained about he's had up here with the traffic. I am not making this up. He said last year it was tolerable, but now it's become more congested. We had a great degree of freedom. These days you have to go to the office before 8 a.m. and stay there till 4. Kamran said, we are tested by cars, positions, wealth, and women. Many of our mujahideen have fallen into these seemingly sweet but actually bitter traps. Oh, yeah. Connie from accounting, she's showing a little ankle around the office. Anyway, I thought the complaints of the so we looked into it a little further. There are some other complaints the Taliban have about working at the office. Would you like to hear some of their? I thought you might. For example, I keep getting my beard stuck in the copier. I can't find wingtips that go with my suicide vest. The snack machine is always out of opium. I'm getting carpal tunnel in my beheading hand. I tell coworkers I used to blow up statues of Buddha, and they say, okay, boomer. I'm used to working from cave. I was due for a promotion, and who did they give it to? The warlord's son. No women are allowed to work here, but HR still makes us sit through a sexual harassment seminar. And of course, you try running accounts payable without Jews.
Good morning. It's Thursday, Delta Force Thursday, February the 8th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and Inside Delta Force. All that and more when I get back. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Goodbye, Maria, I'm off to Korea, far across the sea. It's the same old story, and it's up to Old Glory to win another fight for liberty. So keep the home fires burning, and it won't be long until I'll be returning. Goodbye, Maria, though I'm off to Korea, in my heart you'll always be. a G.I. Joe and you were Bella Marie. Soon we were married, then we sailed away across the ocean blue to my home in Iowa. There we've been living happy as can be, raising fields of corn and a small family. But now, Maria, you must be brave and smile. We're in another fight, so I must leave you for a while. So now it's goodbye, Maria. I'm off to Korea, far across the sea. It's the same old story, and it's up to old glory to win another fight for liberty. So keep the home fires burning, and it won't be long until I'll be returning. Goodbye, Maria, though I'm off to Korea. In my heart, you'll always be my Marie.
Thank you. And now the news.
So you can pick and choose. What it came down to for me is this. I see homeless folks in the streets of New York all the time that are American citizens. I damn sure see them in California. We've got poor, impoverished, starving people who were born and raised in this nation. How in the hell do we come up with a $53 million pilot program for illegals, but folks who are here legally are born here, we don't have enough for them? Just like we could come up with billions for Ukraine, but somehow, some way, we can't fix the homeless problem. I'm down for helping Israel. I'm down for helping address the situations with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, okay? I'm down for helping the Ukrainians and fighting off Russia. What about poor and desolate citizens here? How the hell do you print money for foreign countries, but you don't print that money to help eradicate folks that are starving right here in the streets of America who were born and raised here? This is what I'm talking about. And so when you have something like that, what's the one way to eradicate it? Yes, you got to have a flourishing economy. Yes, you can't have inflation. Yes, you can't be on the verge of a recession. Milk don't need to cost $7. Bread don't need to cost $5. Don't get me started with how much sugar costs. You can talk about employment all you want to. You can talk about the labor participation rate. But guess what? If you ain't making no damn money and you got to get two jobs to pay the same prices or to buy the same amount of stuff that you used to buy and the price is higher than it used to be because of inflation, then guess what? What are you really accomplishing? That's why Trump is on the verge of getting elected, reelected. Because when he was in office, there was a flourishing economy.
And that was Stephen A. Smith with the news. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the patriotic shorts.
Early versions of the P-47 did suffer from poor climb and turning performance. That massive engine added a great deal of weight, and by virtue of the large fuselage needed to hold it, a great deal of parasitic drag too. In order to climb or turn, the engine and wings need to provide the force necessary to lift the plane to higher altitude or shift its direction. These characteristics did not affect the P-47's roll rate, however, where it excelled thanks to fantastic aileron control. However, in a dogfight, being outturned or outclimbed was a death sentence. Climb rates were improved for the P-47D-22 and onward, with the addition of a new, larger propeller, a 4-meter diameter propeller nicknamed the paddle prop. It had a longer cord and distinctive cuffs, which helped channel more air into the engine.
Did you know in the movie The Big Red One, there's a scene where the screams from the foxholes as tanks roll over them may seem unusual, but they were a genuine occurrence. Samuel Fuller, the film's director, once shared an interesting insight. He explained that when they were huddled in those foxholes with tanks passing over them, it was their only opportunity to release all their fear and anxiety through screams without anyone hearing them. It was a way for the soldiers to get all their pent-up emotions out in those very moments.
As a fighter pilot, you never know when a mission will turn deadly. For Captain Snodgrass, it wasn't until he had finished his raid on an Iraqi industrial site and was heading back to base. As leader of a flight of F-14s escorting a group of A-6 intruders and EA-6B prowlers, he was out in front when the missiles broke through the undercast and locked onto him. With lightning-quick reflexes, he rolled into the missiles while pulling 6 to 7 Gs and dropping chaff behind him. The maneuver threw off the missiles but pushed the F-14 out of control, and by the time he brought it back, he had lost altitude and his right engine had stalled. Now he was flying low with one engine over anti-aircraft artillery, wondering how to get out of there. If he went full afterburner with just one engine, he could be mistaken for an Iraqi MiG and shot by friendly forces. So he dropped even closer to the Iraqi guns and picked up just enough speed to get his right engine going again. Then with both engines blazing, he soared back up into the night sky, away from the booming guns.
Poland has had it with American Republicans, with the Polish prime minister saying that Republican senators should be ashamed of themselves for blocking aid to Ukraine, with him tweeting, "Dear Republican senators of America, Ronald Reagan, who helped millions of us to win back our freedom and independence, must be turning in his grave today. Shame on you." Which is kind of a standout because no one unconditionally supports America like Poland. And if Poland's disappointed in us, maybe it's time to self-reflect. Meanwhile, you have the German chancellor coming to Washington to try to change some minds, with him telling reporters that even with Germany's large contributions and commitments, Ukraine still needs American weapons. Meanwhile, we're seeing reports that Trump's reportedly planning that if he gets back into power to target the European Union with punitive trade measures designed to seek revenge. And this would include placing at least a 10% tariff on the EU, as well as going after European digital services. And the EU is saying it's preparing for a potential trade war with Trump. And this, coming after Congress made it basically impossible for him to pull out of NATO should he win the presidency. Also, the leader of NATO, who is just in town to tell Americans that NATO is a good deal that makes them a lot of money, said that NATO has bought $120 billion worth of weapons from America in just the past 2 years.
And that was the Patriotic Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little motivation.
We're all going to have those dark times. We're all going to have those things from our past that could hold us back if we allow them to. But if that's all we focus on, like anger, frustration, darkness, guilt, doubt, all that, it gets us nowhere. But what you have to focus is the lessons that you've learned. And more importantly, what are you going to do going forward?
Now, believing in yourself is simply an attitude. Believing in yourself is a choice. You have to choose to believe that you can do anything you set your mind to. Anything at all.
When you have something you want to do, if you don't develop the courage to do that which has been given you to do, and you spend a lot of time going around trying to convince other people or trying to get their approval, what will happen is that you will lose your nerve. And other people will convince you that what you're doing doesn't have any value, and you'll give up on your dream. It's an interesting thing about life, I've also found, that if you don't have the courage to act, sometimes and particularly if you have something special to do, life will move on you.
What we have to understand about developing ourselves and getting better is that it doesn't take brilliance, and it doesn't take a lot of time, and it doesn't even take a lot of effort, but it must be intentional. The fact that you don't get better automatically, you only get better because you intentionally make a decision to get better. You have to go from being a person of good intentions to a person of good actions. That's the great separator.
When you're working on something you want to achieve, you have got to stand up to that voice. You've got to sell yourself every day on your abilities, on what you're doing, on the goal that you want to reach. You've got to sell yourself every day, according to your level of belief. It will manifest itself in what you're doing. Whatever we have right now, whatever we're demonstrating in our lives, is a result of what we believe subconsciously that we deserve. And part of increasing that belief level is that you have got to convince yourself every day. You can learn all the techniques in the world. If you don't believe in yourself, It won't happen for you. You've got to focus on you. And as you convince you, as you sell yourself every day, you will begin to see a difference in the things that you're doing. Selling yourself on your ability to perform a job, to achieve a certain objective. Telling yourself every day, here I go again. And I got what it takes. This is my day, and nothing out here is going to stop me.
You can be successful if other people don't believe in you. You can overcome those odds and that opposition. But if you don't believe in yourself, no way. You just aren't going to make it. The reason this is so important is that on the other side of personal belief are opportunities and possibilities. And you have to go through the belief door to find those possibilities, to find those opportunities. That if you believe in yourself, it'll take you a lot further than if you don't believe in yourself.
If Bill Gates, who was a college dropout, could become a multi-billionaire, and Stephen J. Cannell, who was a dyslexic student who failed 3 grades in school, can become a best-selling author and a television producer, then you too can accomplish anything if you'll simply believe it's possible.
If you want something out of life, if you want to change yourself, if you want to acquire something, if there's some goal that you want to reach, that is really not easy as some people will make us feel. That living your dream, changing your behaviors, overcoming negative habits, it's challenging. It's hard. That living alone is just very difficult. And once we begin to come to grips with the fact that living is difficult, always something, you will never ever have a problem-free moment in life. It's very important that you engage in an ongoing process to develop you. Spend more time on yourself than what you've been spending. Many of us never realize our greatness because we become sidetracked by secondary activity. We spread ourselves too thin, don't know how to say no. And we find ourselves doing all kinds of things and never ever have time to do those things that we need to do to work on ourselves. And then there goes a second. There goes another second. There goes another second. And we can't stop and hold time. And before you know it, you wake up one day and you're behind in your dreams and your bills. So decide that you're going to take some time to work on you, that you deserve that from yourself, that your life deserves some prime time. Because you are creating your own production. As Michael Todd would say, you are the star of your show. You are the director. You're writing the script. And you will determine whether your life is a smash office hit or flop. You determine that. Working on yourself, talking to yourself. That's so very important.
If you're going to be successful in creating the life of your dreams, you have to believe that you are capable of making it happen. You have to believe that you have the right stuff and that you're able to pull it off. Now, whether you call it self-esteem, self-confidence, or self-assurance, it's a deep-seated belief that you have what it takes, the abilities, the inner resources, the talents, and the skills to create your desired results.
You've got to believe in the community, and you've got to believe in the possibilities. You've got to believe in the economy. You've got to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. But here's the big one. Believe in yourself. There isn't a skill you can't learn. There isn't a discipline you can't try. There isn't a class you couldn't take. There isn't a book you couldn't read. If it's written in some other language, you just get it translated and read it.
To develop yourself, you've got to get out of the intending world and get into the doing world. In fact, your good intentions are good intentions, but they're worthless. Totally worthless. The most overrated phrase in the world is good intentions. I know all kinds of people, they have good intentions, but they never do good because they didn't act upon what they knew. So if you want to develop yourself and you want to get better, just act on what you've already expressed that you want to do. Become a person of action today.
Let me introduce you to the concept of success. Ben Franklin was a pretty smart guy, and I want to start with a quote by him.
If you do tomorrow what you did today, you will get tomorrow what you got today. You want to know what that means? The average American makes between 3 and 5% more each year. That's the deal. And in today's economy, I'm not sure we're going to make the 3 to 4 to 5% next year as employees. So it takes you 20 years to double your income in America as an average person. That's the mediocrity that we're stuck in life. And then you meet people who have the uncanny ability to double their income in a year, to get promoted 5 times in a year. The ones that beat the system, the ones that conquer it. You've all seen them, haven't you? The difference between them and the ones that don't do that is that they wake up in the morning and they think differently. They understand that if I do tomorrow what I did today, I'm going to get tomorrow what I got today. You want a bigger car? How about a nice house in Tahiti? Sure, would you love a nice house in the hills? We all want better things, don't we? We all want more friends, more stuff, more money, more security, more travel, more enjoyment. If you do the same thing tomorrow that you did today, you're stuck. Stuck. And it doesn't change. And it grows a little at a time. And you get a taste of success. But it's never fast enough. It never excites you. And when it does, it's a good month, or a good 2 months, or a good 3 months, but it doesn't provide a trajectory that creates success. So the first thing I want you to think about today is I want you to wake up tomorrow and do something different. And understand if you do the same damn thing, you're stuck. Just because you did it a certain way yesterday, there's no reason to do it that way today. You wake up in the morning, you're failing. So you blame the president, you blame Congress, you blame Greece, blame the euro. I mean, construction industry, it's the mayor. Oh, it's the... And you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror and you're not failing because it's the other guy's fault. Or it's the economy's fault. But if you looked in the mirror and said, I'm failing because of me, you wouldn't like it. And you change that. And I believe the common denominator of failure in any business is excuses. Why are you failing? You never say because of me. Oh, it's the competition. It's the economy. It's the president. It's Congress. If you wake up tomorrow morning and blame your failure on someone or something else, you have no reason to change, do you? It's that son of a fault. Son of a gun! I did everything I could. But if you woke up in the morning and looked in the mirror and said, I am failing because of me, the decisions that I make, the energy I put in, I'm not passing the blame. If you look in the mirror tomorrow and say that, you will change. Because nobody likes thinking of themselves as a failure. How often does that happen to us in our day-to-day lives? Family, the biggest excuse of all. Time. Every one of those excuses was bullshit, wasn't it? Think about it. Every single one. At the end of the day, winners win. But as long as you don't put it on you, you have no motivation to change it. So in short, if you own your failure, you'll own your success. If you don't own your failure, you'll never dig out. And I find that in any business. Always the common denominator of failure, personally, is excuses.
And that was the motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, some combat radio chatter from Vietnam.
What you're about to hear is an excerpt of radio communications from an actual SOG extraction in Laos, January 1971. This audio is intense at times and may trigger unpleasant memories for some, so please use discretion before listening.
Hey, buddy, this is Panther 36. Switch on final. Just be waiting for you. Okay. Now, up here. Speed it down. You're about 300 meters out. Now about 350. You're looking real good. Keep going around. Okay, just stay on it, dog. Keep on it. Keep coming on down. You're looking real good. You're about 3 out. Okay, come up 150 meters out here. Where from? Taking fire. Roger, from where? Roger, 8 o'clock. Keep going around. Right around to the last South October. Listen, buddy, I'll be on my way down there real short. You get that field come up over here. You're not going to do it. Just keep going. 3-6, this is Delta 3. Sorry, 3. Roger, I've got another statement. Carrier fire. Can you take over this ball game? Negative, Dave. Now we got those spares. Okay, those spares aren't here yet. Are you ready to still attempt this? Roger that. I'm game. Switch this to some pretty heavy fire. We're shooting right now as hard as we can. We're going to call it back down here for one more try. That's going to be about all the way. That fire was about 75 meters away from the LZ. Once you go down, give it a try. Just keep going down your left-hand rope. Make a left-hand rope. Go on down. Get the LZ. If it's taking fire, you can come on out. Just keep going down and see what it looks like. Roger, I'm all the way down now. We got to go for a ride. No sweat. No sweat. About 100 meters out. You'll pretty good. Starts blowing it down. It's going to be about looking real good. Just keep bringing it forward. Start losing that altitude. You're looking real good. Okay, you're about 100 meters out. Okay, not quite that far. You're about 50 meters out. Looking real good. Right down there. You should have a panel right to 12 o'clock. Looking real good. About 25 meters out. Looking real good. Right down there. That's looking good. And there's a panel right below you, Lee. Right below you. Panel's underneath us. Come on down, right? That's looking good. I've got it. Short time. I try to hold out. Good. Very nice. Keep going down the left. Looks good. Good. Kick the ladder. Let us go. Now let's contact. Come on down. Keep coming down. Ladders out. Hold it right there. Hold it right there now. They've reached the green light. Hit the left. That's all. This is Delta Papa 3.
And that was the Combat Radio Chatter from Vietnam. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the daily laws, the daily law for February 8th, the perfect mentor.
February 8th, the perfect mentor. Sometime in the late 1960s, V.S. Ramachandran, a medical student at a college in Madras, came upon a book called Eye and Brain, written by an eminent professor of neuropsychology, Richard Gregory. The book excited him, the style of writing, the anecdotes, the provocative experiments he recounted. Inspired by the book, Ramachandran did his own experiments on optics, and soon realized that he was better suited for the field than medicine. In 1974, he was admitted into the PhD program at Cambridge University in visual perception. He began to feel gloomy and alone in a strange country. Then one day, Richard Gregory himself, a professor at Bristol University, came to Cambridge to give a lecture. Ramachandran was mesmerized. Gregory performed thought-provoking demonstrations of his ideas on stage. He had a flair for drama and a great sense of humor. This is what science should be like, Ramachandran thought. He went up after the talk and introduced himself. They had an instant rapport. He mentioned to Gregory an optical experiment he had been pondering, and the professor was intrigued. He invited Ramachandran to visit Bristol and to stay in his home, where they could try out his idea together. Ramachandran took up the offer, and from the moment he saw Gregory's house, he knew he had found his mentor. It was like something out of Sherlock Holmes, full of Victorian instruments, fossils, and skeletons. Gregory was precisely the kind of eccentric Ramachandran could identify with. Soon he was commuting to Bristol regularly for experiments. He had found a lifelong mentor to inspire and guide him, and over the years, he would come to adapt much of Gregory's style of speculation and experiment. Daily law. What to look for? Whose work inspires you? Whose style excites you? Who do you want to be like in 10 years? Mastery, Chapter 3. Absorb the master's power. The mentor dynamic.
And that was February 8th, The Perfect Mentor from the Daily Laws by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Bishop Robert Barron.
Think of Franklin Roosevelt, the young Roosevelt, from this distinguished political family. And then he begins this glittering political career as a young man. He's assistant secretary of the Navy, and everyone's predicting, governor and a president. It just seemed the most natural path for this brilliant young man that charmed everybody he'd ever met. Then, polio and paralysis. And Roosevelt, by all accounts, fell into years, even decades-long depression, self-pity, a sense of fruitlessness and hopelessness. His mother largely encouraged him just to retire. But what made him the great figure that he was? Yeah, to a degree, his positive qualities, he kept those all his life, but the compassion that was born of his struggle with the thorn in the flesh. Where you stumble, that's where you dig for treasure. The Lord says, my grace is sufficient for you, because in your weakness, my power reaches perfection.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, your subconscious is like a computer, more complex a computer than man can build. And its main function is the integration of your ideas. Who programs it? Your conscious mind. If you default, if you don't reach any firm convictions, your subconscious is programmed by chance, and you deliver yourself into the power of ideas you do not know you have accepted. Unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you're a Democrat, you should be voting Republican. And if you're a Democrat woman, because we are the party of women. We're the party of strong women. We know that abortion does not empower women. As a matter of fact, it empowers men. Men are the beneficiaries of abortions, not women. So remember, if you're a Democrat woman, you need to vote Republican. Back in a minute. Thank you. One of the tricks by the left that you're going to come across that is a frequent one, particularly when you're talking about law enforcement and such, is the middle ground fallacy. And they create this by conflating guilt with punishment. Guilt is absolute. Punishment is not. In any trial, there are two parts, the determination of guilt and sentencing. The first part is absolute. You're either guilty or you're not. Gray areas occur during sentencing when we decide what the guilty party deserves. For instance, two people rob a bakery store. One robs the bakery store to feed his family. The other one does it for profit. Both are guilty of robbing the bakery. But do they each deserve the same sentence? And the answer is obviously no. And so that's where we get into gray areas right there. But as far as guilt or innocence is concerned, it's black and white. They're both guilty. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is one of the reasons I just absolutely hate Hugh Hewitt, is that he's so contradictory. He says that he tries to claim to be neutral, but then he comes out and makes these editorial statements. He's a pro-Ukrainian, send money, waste money, throwing it at the Ukraine guys. And why he's that way, I don't know. He's just, again, off his rocker, whatever. But the reason that he uses for this, and the reason they all do, is they say, if we don't do that, then they're going to go, Russia will next go into Lithuania, then they will go into Poland, and then we have the Article 5 of the NATO Charter is going to be enacted, and then we're going to be dragged into the war. And he says, we don't want that. Yes, we do. Obviously, we do. If we didn't want that, we would simply withdraw from NATO. But as long as we stay in NATO and we're committed to NATO, and we're committed to all of NATO, including the triggering provisions, then that's exactly what we're waiting to happen. Okay? So, and then he talks about how we should be giving support to Ukraine to fight its own war, but they're not fighting their own war. They're fighting our war. It is us against Putin, but through a proxy. Except we don't want to fight Putin. If we did, we'd be clamoring our representatives to do a declaration of war against Russia. But obviously we don't. So, and also what he's unaware of is history. This is how we got involved in Vietnam. What he's doing is he's, on the one hand, he says we don't want to get boots on the ground in Europe, but he's, by doing Vietnamizing Ukraine, he's guaranteeing that we're going to do exactly that. And we already have. That this is the way it starts. People say, Vietnam said, send us weapons. So we sent them weapons. And then Vietnam said, I'm sorry, we're too stupid to know how to use these weapons. So then we have to send advisors. Then our advisors come under attack. Then we have to send troops to protect our advisors. And then it escalates. More attacks on our troops. More troops get sent. And pretty soon we're in it up to our neck. That's what happened in Vietnam. That's what Hugh Hewitt is setting up here. We're going to end up in Ukraine. We're going to end up with a whole bunch of troops in there fighting the Russians directly. And we're not even going to know why. How the hell did we end up with this? And then we're going to have the same ending in which we're pushing helicopters off of the edge of aircraft carriers so we can get Ukrainians, we can fit more Ukrainian refugees on the aircraft carrier, just like we did in Vietnam. Don't listen to Hugh Hewitt. He's wrong. He's absolutely wrong. And certainly not conservative. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Stuart Varney's My Take for February the 8th.
So it was right about 45,129 as we speak. That's the markets. And now this. Today, President Biden heads to Virginia to address Democrat Party retreat. He brings good news. There's chaos among Republicans in Congress, and it makes him and the Democrats look good. The border bill is dead, killed off by Senate Republicans and Donald Trump. Mitch McConnell's leadership is in question. The Wall Street Journal says this: the death of the border deal is at bottom a bloody-minded operation by Mr. Trump and his allies to flog border chaos through November and, if possible, bring down Senator McConnell as GOP Senate leader, end quote. Follow this through, please. NBC reports that Biden may jump in with executive orders of his own to stem the migrant flow. Think about that. He takes the action the Republicans want him to take, and he takes the credit. He will try to grab the migrant issue away from the chaotic Republicans. The sinking of the border bill also meant the sinking of aid to Ukraine and Israel. So now the Democrats will vote on a new bill with money and weapons for both, and it will likely pass. Think of that. Biden and the Democrats stepping in to help our allies, bypassing the Republican disaster. This couldn't have come at a better time for the president. He's down in the polls and he's obviously in cognitive decline. And then there's the failed impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas. The Republicans have been building up to this for months, and it failed at the last minute. You don't think Biden will have fun with that? Again, couldn't have come at a better time for the president. His campaign needs a lift. Down in the polls, and then along come the Republicans. It's like manna from heaven, a gift from the GOP. Second Aravani, just getting started.
So I wanted to say is disregard everything he's just said, because, again, it's all self-serving. He's interested in ratings, and he's interested in filling airtime. Okay, nowhere in there does he suggest any type of a solution. And again, this is supposed to be analysis, and this is where the guys that are involved with news/analysis get in trouble. They end up having news that's somewhat or very partisan, and their analysis is neutral. And that's exactly what happened here. He presents this very neutral picture. Now, the other thing that he's doing is called determinism. He is putting forth the idea that things happen automatically, that things just happen, that everybody is a domino, and that if domino A falls over, it necessarily knocks over domino B and C and D and E, and it's just not true. We have people who have free will. Everything that he's talking about in terms of what he says will happen because the Republicans didn't pass a border bill is speculation. He's speculating that this will happen. So is the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal article is simply speculating. The other article that he cited is the same thing. It's all simply speculation, but they're trying to sell it as though it's a sure thing by suggesting that life is deterministic, that everybody's a domino, and that once the first domino falls over, all the rest just follow suit. And it's simply not true. So again, don't take his analysis seriously. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the beginning of Chapter 13, Know Your Enemy, from the 33 Strategies of War.
Chapter 13, Know Your Enemy, the Intelligence Strategy. The target of your strategies should be less the army you face than the mind of the man or woman who runs it. If you understand how that mind works, you have the key to deceiving and controlling it. Train yourself to read people, picking up the signals they unconsciously send about their innermost thoughts and intentions. A friendly front will let you watch them closely and mine them for information. Beware of projecting your own emotions and mental habits onto them. Try to think as they think. By finding your opponent's psychological weaknesses, you can work to unhinge their minds. The Mirrored Enemy. In June 1838, Lord Auckland, the British Governor-General of India, called a meeting of his top officials to discuss a proposed invasion of Afghanistan. Auckland and other British ministers had become increasingly concerned at Russia's growing influence in the area. The Russians had already made an ally of Persia. They were now trying to do the same with Afghanistan. And if they were successful, the British in India would find themselves potentially cut off by land to the west and vulnerable to more incursions by the Russians. Instead of trying to outdo the Russians and negotiate an alliance with the Afghan ruler Dost Muhammad, Auckland proposed what he thought was a surer solution: invade Afghanistan, and install a new ruler, Shah Shuja, a former Afghan leader forced out of power 25 years earlier, who would then be indebted to the English. Among the men listening to Auckland that day was William McNaughton, the 45-year-old chief secretary of the Calcutta government. McNaughton thought the invasion a brilliant idea. A friendly Afghanistan would secure British interests in the area and even help to spread British influence. And the invasion could hardly fail. The British Army would have no trouble sweeping away the primitive Afghan tribesmen. They would present themselves as liberators, freeing the Afghans from Russian tyranny and bringing to the country the support and civilizing influence of England. As soon as Shah Shuja was in power, the army would leave, so that British influence over the grateful Shah, although powerful, would be invisible to the Afghan public. When it came time for McNaughton to give his opinion on the proposed invasion, his support of it was so sound and enthusiastic that Lord Auckland not only decided to go ahead, he named McNaughton the Queen's envoy to Kabul, the Afghan capital, the top British representative in Afghanistan. Meeting little resistance along the way, in August 1839, the British Army reached Kabul. Dost Mohammed fled to the mountains, and the Shah re-entered the city. To the local inhabitants, this was a strange sight. Shah Shuja, whom many could barely remember, looked old and submissive alongside McNaughton, who rode into Kabul wearing a bright-colored uniform, topped by a cocked hat fringed with ostrich feathers. Why had these people come? What were they doing here? With the Shah back in power, McNaughton had to reassess the situation. Reports came in informing him that Dost Mohammed was building an army in the mountains to the north. Meanwhile, to the south, it seemed that in invading the country, the British had insulted some local chieftains by plundering their lands for food. These chiefs were now stirring up trouble. It was also clear that the Shah was unpopular with his former subjects, so unpopular that McNaughton could not leave him and other British interests in the country unprotected. Reluctantly, McNaughton ordered most of the British Army to remain in Afghanistan until the situation was stabilized. Time went by, and eventually McNaughton decided to allow the officers and soldiers of this increasingly long-standing occupying force to send for their families, so that life would be less harsh for them. Soon the wives and children came, along with their Indian servants. But where McNaughton had imagined that the arrival of the soldiers' families would have a humanizing, civilizing effect, it only alarmed the Afghans. Were the British planning a permanent occupation? Everywhere the local people looked, there were representatives of British interests, talking loudly in the streets, drinking wine, attending theaters and horse races. Strange imported pleasures that they had introduced to the country. Now their families were making themselves at home. A hatred of everything English began to take root. There were those who warned McNaughton about this, and to all of them he had the same answer. Everything would be forgotten and forgiven when the army left Afghanistan. The Afghans were childlike, emotional people. Once they felt the benefits of English civilization, they would be more than grateful. One matter, however, did worry the envoy. The British government was unhappy about the increasing expense of the occupation. McNaughton would have to do something to cut costs, and he knew just where to begin. Most of the mountain passes through which Afghanistan's main trade routes ran were held by the Gilji tribes, who for many years, over the lives of many different rulers of the country, had been paid a stipend to keep the passes open. McNaughton decided to have this stipend. The Giljis responded by blocking the passes, and elsewhere in the country, tribes sympathetic to the Giljis rebelled. McNaughton, caught off guard, tried to put these rebellions down, but he did not take them too seriously, and worried officers who told him to respond more vigorously were rebuked for overreacting. Now the British Army would have to stay indefinitely. The situation deteriorated quickly. In October 1841, a mob attacked the home of a British official and killed him. In Kabul, local chiefs began to conspire to expel their British overlords. Shah Shuja panicked. For months, he had begged MacNaughton to let him capture and kill his main rivals, an Afghan ruler's traditional method of securing his position. MacNaughton had told him that a civilized country did not use murder to solve its political problems. The Shah knew that the Afghans respected strength and authority, not civilized values. To them, his failure to deal with his enemies made him look weak and unruler-like and left him surrounded by enemies. MacNaughton would not listen. The rebellion spread, and MacNaughton now had to confront the fact that he did not have the manpower to put down a general uprising. But why should he panic? The Afghans and their leaders were naive. He would regain the upper hand through intrigue and cleverness. To that end, MacNaughton publicly negotiated an agreement whereby British troops and citizens would leave Afghanistan, in exchange for which the Afghans would supply the retreating British with food. Privately, though, MacNaughton made it known to a few key chiefs that he was willing to make one of them the country's vizier and load him with money, in exchange for putting down the rebellion and allowing the English to stay. The chief of the Eastern Gilgis, Akbar Khan, responded to this offer, and on December 23, 1841, MacNaughton rode out for a private meeting with him to seal the bargain. After exchanging greetings, Akbar asked MacNaughton if he wanted to go ahead with the treachery they were planning. Thrilled to have turned the situation around, MacNaughton cheerily answered that he did. Without a word of explanation, Akbar signaled his men to grab MacNaughton and throw him in prison. He had no intention of betraying the other chiefs. Along the way, a mob developed, caught hold of the unfortunate envoy, and with a fury built up over years of humiliation, literally tore him to pieces. His limbs and head were paraded through the streets of Kabul, and his torso was hung from a meat hook in the bazaar. In a matter of days, everything unraveled. The remaining British troops, some 4,500 of them, along with 12,000 camp followers, were forced to agree to an immediate retreat from Afghanistan despite the bitter winter weather. The Afghans were to keep the retreating army supplied, but did not do so. Certain that the British would never leave unless forced to, they harassed them relentlessly in their retreat. Civilians and soldiers alike quickly perished in the snow. On January 13th, British forces at the fort in Jalalabad saw a single horse struggling toward the gates. Its half-dead rider, Dr. William Brydon, was the sole survivor of the British Army's doomed invasion of Afghanistan. Interpretation. The knowledge that would have averted the catastrophe was at MacNaughton's fingertips long before he launched the expedition. Englishmen and Indians who had lived in Afghanistan could have told him that the Afghan people were among the proudest and most independent on the planet. To them, the image of foreign troops marching into Kabul would constitute an unforgivable humiliation. On top of that, they were not a people yearning for peace, prosperity, and reconciliation. In fact, they saw strife and confrontation as a healthy way of life. MacNaughton had the information, but refused to see it.
And that was the first part of Chapter 13, Know Your Enemy, from the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.